So welcome back to Will's Wheelhouse. Today we're working on a Miata. It had a coolant leak and it was coming from a very tough spot, so I'm going to show you where that's at. Coming from this piece right here, and this goes to your radiator hose and to your heater core. There's an O-ring inside here that you really should replace, but mine was leaking right here. I recently did a water pump replacement and the gasket it was provided with did not hold very well, so I had to replace that. So basically there's a bolt right here, there's a bolt directly underneath it back here in the same spot pretty much, which is really a pain in the butt to get. You have to remove your power steering, get it out of the way. Also had to remove the power steering bracket right here, and that bolted right here. So there's a bolt back there, a bolt hole back there. There's a hole right here and a hole right here, and the bracket goes right back on. So I've got it replaced, and we'll see. Alright, so now we're putting this all back together. It's easiest with a ratchet wrench to get to the bottom bolt down here. Make sure you get this good and tight, otherwise you're going to have a leak. Tighten the lower, tighten the upper.
Mostly cloudy skies tonight, before a low around 55. Tomorrow, partly cloudy, 30% chance of showers and a high of 71. And a 50% chance of rain for Wednesday night, low near 57.
This report is brought to you by the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. Someone you know is suffering from Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. They're dealing with excruciating pain and days when they won't be able to go.
So now that's back together. You got to get your bracket put back on. It's really hard to do with one hand. There's 3 bolts. So get those put back in. Alright, so now we have the bracket bolted back up. We've got the water pump connector hooked up. That was 12 millimeter. The power steering bracket, those 3 bolts were 14 millimeter. You have to push this, after you get your power steering out, you got to tap this bushing back so you can get to the bolt that's located right there. Reinstall your radiator hose. Then you can reinstall your power steering, and after you're done with that, you'll reinstall your air filter box that you have to remove to get to access to this area. Alright, so now we have the power steering bolted back up. Make sure your belt's tight. Now there's the pivot bolt down here that goes to the bracket that we took off the engine right there. It goes all the way through, and that bushing that you had to hammer out when you tighten up the bolt and nut set right there, it will pull that bushing back in. Reinstall your belt, tighten your belt using this bolt right here, and when you're done, lock it down with this nut right here. These are 12 millimeters. That one's 14 millimeter. So to recap, remove your air filter housing. There's a 12 millimeter nut right there, or bolt, excuse me. There's a 12 millimeter bolt right there, another one right there, another one right here. You'll have to take this air tube off, so loosen this up, which is a 10 millimeter. My car had cruise, so I had to remove this bolt here, this bolt here. This just lays out of the way, the air box lays out of the way. Remove your power steering if you're equipped with it. 14 millimeter, 14 millimeter, 12 millimeter, and 12 millimeter. Then you have your bracket, 3 bolts on that, those were 14 millimeter. And then you had the coolant tube that came off the water pump, which you can't see, but that was 2 12 millimeter bolts. And don't forget that O-ring that went on the pipe right there that goes to your heater core. Last but not least, after you're finished reinstalling everything that you've taken out, the airbox, the power steering unit, the bracketry, your gasket, don't forget to refill your coolant. You can bleed it through this, so just remove this sensor, unscrew this, I believe it's a 17 millimeter, add your coolant to your radiator, fill it up till it comes out here, put your sensor back in, reconnect it, your power steering sensor, don't forget to hook this wire back up, put your cap back on, start the car up, and check for leaks. Thanks again. This is Will's Wheelhouse. We'll see you next time.